It's time for my March reads. That's not really a song, but let's talk about everything I read in March. I meant to put some lipstick or something on just so like my lips aren't so dry, but I forgot. So hopefully they're not crusty. Anyway, hello book friends. Welcome back to the channel. Hello if you're new, it's Alyssa. I am ready to talk about everything I read in March. It was a good month. Last month was better. This month was good. Hopefully April is stellar, but I will tell you there is one book on this list that I'm reading right now in April. Well, it's not on this list, but there's one book in April that I'm reading. It is sending me. I'm losing my marbles. I can only read like a chapter at a time. That's how much it's making me lose my marbles. So I can't wait to come on here and rage about that. But that's not the point about this video. This video is about talking about March, not April. Get back to it, Alyssa. Let's pull up my Storygraph stats and talk about everything I read last month. In the month of March, I read 14 books, which was 4,276 pages. We're getting a little bit more moody like I usually am. So we're emotional, sad, reflective. We still have some funny and lighthearted stuff on here, some adventurous stuff on here, but it's getting a little moodier. I feel like I might be becoming myself again. Pace is either slow or medium. Like, I don't know where all the fast-paced books went, but cool. I was happy. I didn't notice I didn't feel like anything truly dragged, so I guess that's good. Page count, mostly under 500, pretty decent split between 3 to 5, and under 3. So the little books are creeping up, I think, in the things that I'm reading this year. I'm reading a heck of a lot more nonfiction in 2024, I've noticed. And we can talk a little bit at the end about some things that I'm feeling coming into Q2 of the year and how I'm feeling about this quarter. And maybe we can keep doing little check-ins quarterly to see like how I really feel about my reading, because I have changed how I read. If you saw my ins and outs video from the end of last year, you'll know that I'm trying to be more intentional with my reading, a little bit more of a mood reader, a little less like TBR based, a little less influenced by my friends to read things that they're reading and getting distracted from the books that I really truly want to read, and not getting so distracted by like the popular book on BookTok or whatever. So anyway, we can do a little check-in. But one of the big things I've noticed is nonfiction has creeped up in the rankings for me. So we're 29% and 71%. So 29% nonfiction is pretty darn good. Genres, we have literary on top, so we're getting back to normal. Sorry, fantasy, but you're going back down to your regular spot, but not this month. You went down a little further. So literary, and then historical and fantasy are next. LGBTQ, obviously, we are always for the gays and the theys over here on this channel. So give me all the queer lit. I love it. And then poetry has also been creeping up a bit in my reading. So poetry is there in my top 6. My average rating is 3.93, which is not as good as last month, but is still a really stellar rating for books. I had a few more books on this list that I just didn't like compared to last month, but overall had a really decent reading month. And we'll talk a little bit about how I feel about all that when we get to the end of the video and do some reflections. Okay, these tend to not be in exactly the order that I read them. I think they're in the order that I started them, but let's talk about everything I read, go book by book. This is the part a lot of you really love. We've pulled up my Bookly app and let's talk about them. I am going to try to catch up and reread all of the Veronica Speedwell. Sorry, my brain went blank for a second. The Veronica Speedwell mysteries. So I started with the first one last month, A Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn. I really like Deanna Raybourn. I like her writing. I like her like mystery romances. I don't know what the term is. I don't think publishing has made a snazzy term yet. I really enjoy these. This is set in, I could be wrong, it might not be Victorian London, but basically she is orphaned. She's a lepidopterist, so she studies butterflies. She had been raised by these two older ladies. The last one of those ladies dies at the funeral. This German man, I think he's German, I could be wrong. He shows up and he's like, I knew your mother. I need to like tell you something. Come with me. I'll take you wherever you need to go." She's like, "Cool." I was on my way to another like butterfly related trip. So I'll just use this guy for a free trip to London. And then she ends up on this whole mysterious romp through all kinds of places. She ends up in the circus and she's doing all this stuff. And she finds out some pretty saucy little uh, facts about her mother that could potentially have some huge political ramifications for England at the time. It's a blast. I need to get into book 2 this month at some point. They're just fun. If you just want something fun, let's do it. I need to speed this up, but I don't normally spend this much time talking about each book. I'm not used to doing this. I haven't filmed in a little while. So Madeline Elliott is my new little favorite indie romantasy author. I'm just really enjoying her. I read her whole King and Coven trilogy. I did not know there's also 2 novellas that follow these side characters, and I have to find those and read those because they go off page somewhere in book between books 2 and 3, and some things happen, and I don't know what happens to them. And apparently it gets resolved in these novellas, but that's not the point of this. I read The Ballad of Sea and Sky, which is the first in a new duology of hers. It's about a Selkie and a siren, and there's obviously like a war between these people and something sets them apart, and then he like kidnaps her, and then they end up on stranded on an island, and there's all kinds of fun stuff going on. There's what are the horse ones? Editing Alyssa will answer my brain fog. I just really love it. It's just fun. It just makes me happy. The first 2 books I read this month are just like fun, frivolous, good time books. I think the second one will come out at the end of the year sometime, maybe around my birthday. So I got this one as an anniversary present from my partner, and then maybe for my birthday he can get me the next one so I can finish that series. But I just love her. If you just want like a fun little romantasy, I think that she writes fun ones. She also has a bind up of all of her ones, like her first series, and I think they're all sort of Jane Austen loosely based, but romantasy. Very curious about it. Next up is The Lonely City, which is kind of like a memoir, kind of a long essay. It's by Olivia Lang. So this is just all about looking at loneliness and loneliness where it intersects with art. It starts with her having to move to New York by herself when she was originally going to come here with a partner, and she's exploring her own loneliness and then exploring the loneliness of several major artists, including Andy Warhol. It's very interesting. I very much was into this in the sense that it got me. I was so interested in the artists that she talks about in this and learning more, and it does intersect with the AIDS epidemic at some point. I love to read about it, but I'm so angry when I do because it was so criminal what we did to these men and how we left them hanging and treated them so poorly. And we can go on and on and on about that in a separate video, but I really found this interesting. It made me learn about some new artists. It made me learn a little bit more about Andy Warhol. I'm still not sold on him as a person. He seems very strange to me. I don't really like his art. Like, I just don't get it. It's not for me. And art is so subjective. I mean, it could be for you. It's not for me. Definitely interesting. I really like this one. I think I got this as a recommendation from, I want to say it's from either Mauve ASMR or from Katie James. I don't know. I randomly on BookTube or something. I found somebody who was talking about it. So that's how it kind of came into my life. Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong is a collection of poetry. Loved this. This was phenomenal. Absolutely stunning. I have such a weakness for Ocean Vuong. The vulnerability, the pain, the humor that is also laced into this. Oh, they're so raw. I love it. I love Ocean Vuong. I'll read anything. You're right. Anything. Also, it checks something off of one of the books I bought this year. So reading some of the books that I already bought. I still got to read books that I bought last year, but that's okay. Fruit of the Dead by Rachel Lyon. I really enjoyed this. I feel like I might do a standalone review on this. I'm not quite sure. Let me know in the comments if you want to see a full review of this. This recently came out. I want to say it came out from Scribner. I could be wrong, but the publisher did send this to me. I forgot that I had it, and then I saw it coming out on Pub Day, and so I picked it up and read it, and that happens a lot because I do get a lot of pub mail. This is a Persephone and Demeter retelling, or Persephone and Hades retelling, but it really focuses on the mother and the daughter and less on Hades and Persephone. I think that we all really obsess over this one particular myth because you can read it one of 2 ways. It is either a myth where Persephone by choice goes with Hades and loves him, or it is Hades essentially taking her and essaying her and keeping her kind of hostage down there in the underworld. So there's different ways to read this, and I feel like Hades is much more of a villain than he is anything else in a traditional sense, but we do like to make this a romantic, like make it romantic. Like we like to romanticize Hades and Persephone. So this was really interesting to read sort of from a different angle, coming at it from the mother-daughter lens. It's set in a modern day. There's a young girl. She is like just barely a woman, and she is working at the summer camp. Her mother is off doing whatever her mother is doing. She's like a CEO of an NGO. She travels the world. The mother's a single mother, and they don't have the best relationship. And you find that it's become more strained because of something that has happened to the daughter. The way the mother reacts to what happened to the daughter kind of makes them distance even further. And she is the daughter, she's a camp counselor. And at the end of the season, this father is basically like, "You're so good with my kids. Do you want to come be like the nanny for the summer?" And she ends up on this remote island with this like Fortune 500 billionaire CEO who works for a pharmaceutical company. He's very much like one of the Sacklers. He's like Mortimer Sackler takes you to his private island and you watch his kids for the summer. And then he becomes this very like lecherous man. He kind of drugs her. Well, he doesn't kind of, he does drug her. The parts on the island are very uncomfortable to read. All of the Persephone POVs are very important to read. And these aren't their names in the book, by the way. I just cannot remember their names because I can't possibly remember everybody's name of every freaking book I've ever read. I can barely remember the names of the people that I know. Anyway, so the Persephone storyline is very uncomfortable to read. But then what I found really interesting is that the mother storyline, which they alternate between, uh, is so gut wrenching as this mother, one is dealing with her daughter being like basically signed an NDA, can't talk to her, is on this island, doesn't know what's happening. Other things are happening with her business. She's dealing with her own things, and then she has to deal with the fact that she basically has to find her daughter, and she goes on this journey to get her daughter back. And you see all this internal struggle of the mother. And I feel like what it did for me in particular, because I don't have kids, is it made me have a better look at what it might be like to be a mother, to have that very contentious bond between a mother and a daughter that can exist. And it in a way helped me maybe understand my mother a little bit more. And I don't know if everybody who read this felt this way, and I don't know if you have your own kids how you would read this, but it was very interesting. Loved this, and I loved alluding to the Sacklers very heavily. Loved that. Anyway, moving on. Let me know if you want a full actual review with details. Time as a Mother is the other collection of Ocean Vuong poetry that I read. I think that's everything. I think I've read everything they have that's like printed in a book. I think there's other things in different collections places, but all bound up together. I think this is everything. This is the collection he wrote after his mother was diagnosed with, I believe it's breast cancer, and she passes away. And there was one poem in here that wasn't even like, I, I don't even know if you could call it a poem. It is essentially him going through all of the things that his mother bought in her Amazon account month by month leading up to when she dies, and watching how those everyday items change until there's just like a month with nothing because she's dead. I literally was crying. I know it sounds like that shouldn't be like emotional, but the way it is done and like the pattern of it is crying. I love Ocean Vuong. I don't love this. I feel like this is like a booktube darling or a book talk darling. This is one of those things that I read out of curiosity and got from the library as an audiobook. And perhaps I should have just remembered my mission for the year, which is to read the books that I have, because I have some pretty stellar books here and I maybe don't need to branch out into like book talk darlings. But I did not like this. This is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed, if you can't read the screen. And I enjoyed the vibes. The vibes were immaculate. It's very like mysterious Cornwall coast, um, fairies, dark, claustrophobic. Loved it. But our main character cried entirely too much. I There's a whole scene at the end where this guy is like drowning for what feels like forever while she's having some fight with some other baddie in the book. And then she goes to where he's drowning. He should be dead by now, by the way. It doesn't make any sense logically. And she's like, he was drowned up to his shoulders. I don't think that that's how it bothered me so much because I just don't think that that's how the word drown is supposed to be used. He was submerged up to his shoulders. but he wasn't drowned up to his shoulders. It bugged me. There was a lot of stuff about, like, how this was written that really, really, really irritated me, but the vibes, I will give you, the vibes were immaculate, so got some points for that. What I think the problem is that I wish that this had been written for adults and not for YA, because I think that that did it a disservice because it just didn't get as dark and creepy as perhaps it needed to get in to match the vibes, and she could have spent more time on certain things and really just dug in and hit some topics that are much more adult perhaps. I think that would have been better, but I also don't know if Ava Reid can do that because 'cause I've never really read anything else by them. So maybe that's just not in their wheelhouse, but I no. I say skip it, but I do know that a lot of people really liked it. But the vibes are immaculate. I will give it that one positive. Dead Weight. These are essays on hunger and harm. This is a collection of essays on eating disorders and all things around eating disorders to basically show how, like, the healthcare system fails people with eating disorders, how the world sort of vilifies you or treats you. They were very interesting. The author does a really good job of trying very hard to not make this triggering and also to not make this almost like a how-to manual, because oftentimes when people write stories of, like, maybe their eating disorder or write about them, it can kind of become a how-to. So when you are very sick, you can read maybe Jane Fonda's account of how she had an eating disorder and copy it, and that does occur. I have struggled with eating disorders in the past, and I really found this very eye-opening and very interesting. It was also very emotionally a very interesting read because I did find it bordering on triggering, and I think that there's only so much that you can keep this from being triggering, in all honesty, if you've had a history with eating disorders. But um, yeah, very interesting essays. I actually really liked this. I just could only read them in chunks. If that's something that you're interested in, I say pick it up. But if you have any sort of disordered eating history, I would suggest maybe you don't just, like, binge read this, and listen to your thoughts and be kind to yourself. And if it is too much, just stop. Um, but yeah, I actually enjoyed this, which sounds weird, but I enjoyed it. I loved this so much. So, the publisher sent me a copy of James, by Percival Everett, like, way back in, like, the middle of 2023, and I didn't read it because 'cause I'm bad. I'm the worst. I'm the absolute worst at reading ARCs, at least before they come out. But let me tell you, I loved this. So I personally think that Percival Everett is a phenomenal writer. I like the way he uses humor to balance his incredibly heavy stories. This is a retelling of Huck Finn following Jim, and it holds like a mirror up to society. It makes the reader, the white reader in particular, face a lot of things that are very uncomfortable, but there's also a lot of humor in it as well. It's dark humor, it's biting humor. There is a lot to be said from that humor. Like, it's not just a throwaway laugh. It's the kind of thing where you laugh and then you stop and you're like, "Oh, wait a second. That got me to think about something, or that made me feel a little bad, actually." I really like this. I loved this so much. I love this so much that I honestly want to reread Huck Finn just to see where they diverge. I think it's worth the read. And it's made me want to read more Percival Everett because I've read The Trees, loved it. This, loved it. I just really enjoy the way he writes and the way he doesn't hold any punches. Is that pull any punches? That's the phrase. He doesn't pull any punches, but he also finds a way to find balance in the writing. So you do find yourself chuckling along at times while you're also kind of getting, like, gut punched, looking at the raw reality of life in America, essentially. I did finally finish the Farseer trilogy. I think I might do a little wrap-up video of just my feelings on the entire trilogy, but Assassin's Quest, done, dusted, loved this. I need to start the next, what is it, the Live Ship Traders. I will be starting that in the next couple of days. I'm trying to get a couple things off the decks before I start that because I'm gonna probably binge it. But yes, Loved it. Everybody who told me to read Hob, you were right. You were right. You were right. I know that you don't need to know that because you knew you were right, but I didn't know you were right. So now I can tell you you were right. Thank you. You saw me reading this in my recent vlog, but The Mermaid of Black Conch, loved this. So good, so heartbreaking, but also heartwarming at times. I like the fairy tale nature of it. I like the non-traditional fairy tale nature of it. And by mean non-traditional, I mean like usually we see people writing about in popular fiction very European fairy tales. So I like seeing more folklore and stuff from other places. So these mermaids were very interesting to me, or this mermaid was very interesting to me. I found the way it was written very beautiful. I loved the lyrical nature of the mermaids. Uh, Poetry sections. It was just such a good time. I can't believe it took me that long to read it. Please pick it up if you enjoy magical realism. This is like magical realism that I don't think is intimidating. I know a lot of people don't like magical realism, but I think I think this is pretty like global. Like everybody could get into this. I did not like this book. So Weird Fox by Lynn Tellman. I will be getting rid of this. This is getting on hold. I just don't like it. I don't know what the point was. So the fucks are not weird. The fucks are just Nenny. You're following presumably Lynn through her life and her different lovers. And she does live an interesting life. But the way it's written is like, and then I saw Tom, and then Bill and Jane came, and then the next chapter. And then you're like, well, here's another guy. Here's Sam, and here's this. And then 6 chapters later, they're like, Bill and Jane came over again. Like, I'm supposed to know who any of these people are. It is written like we all know each other, which could be fine if you pull it off, but it's just annoying. I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are. I don't care who any of these people are. Maybe if I was more into like the 1960s, 70s art scene, I might care more about certain things because there is reference to different directors and stuff, but I don't know who those people are and I don't care. So I didn't really get into it. And this it wasn't even weird. Give me some weird fucks, okay? I can't I just hate it because that is a stunning cover. Okay, and then my last two books are actually for a video that I'm working on. I just have to kind of, I don't want to call it script, but like talking points. I'm working on it, and that is I want to do another companion reads with Grapes of Wrath and whose names are unknown, and also Naomi and I will be talking about this over on the podcast at some point. So look, stay tuned for that. But I did reread both of these technically, though. After getting to the end of Grapes of Wrath, I've realized that though I was supposed to have read this in high school, I am not convinced that I read this in high school because if I did, how come I don't remember that very interesting ending with a particular character and an old man and her boob? So I'm actually not convinced that I've reread this, but we're going to pretend like I did because I know I was supposed to have read it. And there's every chance that I just fried my brain and don't remember this, but I did enjoy Grapes of Wrath. I think it is beautifully written. I love the sort of rallying cry chapters where Steinbeck sort of waxes on about the banks and how, the capitalism treats the poor. And he flirts with this idea of like calling for socialism, but he never truly like goes hard into like unionization or socialism. He his leanings are there and the intent is there, but it's sort of he uses all this allegory and his fun like Steinbeck like Becky like language, his modernist style to just make it so that you kind of it's not in your face, I guess is my point. It is, but it isn't. You can kind of ignore it in some ways and get wrapped up in the story of the Jodes and like, oh my God, these poor people and all of that. Whereas the next book, whose names are unknown by Sonora Babb, is much more in your face. It's much more realistic. It's much more honest. And in my opinion, I think for a modern reader in particular, is a better book on the same sort of topic. When I do my companion reads, we'll talk a lot more about why these two books are so connected and this idea that pops up all the time of whether or not Steinbeck plagiarized. Spoiler for the video, I don't think he plagiarized, but there is definitely a lot of her influence in Grapes of Wrath because of her work with the FSA. She very much influenced the writing of Grapes of Wrath. And when you get to the second part of Whose Names Are Unknown, I think it becomes much more clear where he may have been mirroring things that were in some of her FSA reports that he had access to. And I believe they also had dinners and stuff together too. So it is an interesting story that you'll have to wait to hear, or you can just Google it and look it up. But I think of the two, Whose Names Are Unknown is a much better book about the Dust Bowl and poverty and that migration to California in search of some sort of plenty during the 1930s in the U.S. Than Grapes of Wrath. Yeah, that's my honest opinion. That is everything I read in March. I think it was overall a good month. I didn't dislike that many things, but the things I disliked, I very much disliked. I will say that. Carrying over into April, I am still bringing Lies and Sorcery. I did read a little bit more of it last month. So I'm chipping away at that. So just know that that's going to be getting carried over probably through most of the year. I think I said that last month too. So just yay. Again, same thing. I forget that I'm reading it. And then I start reading it again and I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't bad. That happens every time. And then I did start my reread of Pride and Prejudice, which I will be wrapping up this month. And we will get another installment in my year with Austen. And we'll talk all about Pride and Prejudice, which is one of my faves. It used to be my favorite, but now that I've gotten older, Persuasion has started to try to nudge Pride and Prejudice out of the top spot of the Austens. I also realized that I've never read the Juvenilia, so at some point I do have to read the Juvenilia. But anyway, so that's what's carrying over into from month to month. And then let's talk a little bit about just sort of my overall reflections on how this quarter has gone. Don't mind my mic. I really have enjoyed reading more intentionally. I think that a couple things have been working really well for me. One is really not talking so much with people about doing buddy reads. I really have been trying to avoid a buddy read as much as possible. I obviously read books with the Patreon, I read books with TBR Lowdown, I read books with my friends over at Plek occasionally, but I'm not doing as many like we're going to read all these books, you and I, all the time and I'm going to like just drop everything and pick up some random book because me and person uh over there talked briefly about something that we wanted to read and now we're reading it when it's as opposed to it being something that I just kind of put on the list for later. I don't know if that made any sense or if that was articulate at all. I don't think it was, but hopefully you get my point. I've been being much more intentional with the buddy reads that I pick to do. I'm also just being more intentional with the books that I pick. I'm being much more vicious about deliver later on my Libby hold and making sure that I'm really accepting the holds that I want to read today, like in this week, in whatever the borrow period is. I really want to be reading these and I can conceivably read them in this borrow period. I'm also trying not to feel like pressure when I'm behind. I've been behind in the Farseer trilogy buddy read since the second book, and I don't mind. It's kind of fun because we've been using Storygraph, their buddy read feature, which is a good feature if you do use the Storygraph. And it's kind of nice to go through, and I feel like I'm so behind that I'm just reading everybody's comments as I read along. And I don't know if anybody sees mine because they've moved on to the next book or something, but it's kind of fun to react to everybody and comment and all that. I used to feel a lot of pressure at being left behind, but I just don't care. Like I know I'm going to get there and I know we're all going to talk about it and no one's going to be like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it anymore cuz I finished that last week." No. So I have to stop that like fake pressure on myself. And I feel like the book journal has really helped a lot. I feel like I'm really digesting my books better. I know I'm reading less year over year right now compared, if we compare month to month, year to year. I have read fewer books this year, but I think I'm liking my books more and I'm just generally enjoying reading more because it's much more about like exploration and fun, which is what I wanted. And I think the book journal has helped a lot to have a space where I can work out thoughts and jot things down and interact more with what I'm reading. And it's helping with like reading comprehension. And I think it helps when I do reviews. You guys tell me when I do individual reviews, are they a little bit better now that I'm doing this book journal or not? But I think that that's one of the best things that I implemented in my reading for me, and I think that making it so simple, like I know that some people need like those very elaborate book journal spreads and like prompts and this, that, and the other thing. I just don't read like that. I read more like a mood reader. And so it's just nice to have a very simple place to go to and jot down my thoughts. And I also just really like the little book covers that I stick in each month because I just feel like it's like a little reward when you finish a book to like peel off the book and put it in there. There's also like I print out all the little covers of all the books I'm thinking about, almost like a TBR, but it's like very fluid. And then like I kind of just go into my little envelope in the back of my book journal and like rifle through them and I decide, ooh, that's the one I want to read. And yeah, I'm really enjoying it. That was a good addition. If you can hear rustling, Mercy is on the bed behind the camera, just readjusting herself. So she is making herself known, friends. She is there. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up because I think I've blabbered on a little too long. So thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go